President Trump's education department is moving to bar illegal immigrants from using taxpayer funds for tuition.
During the Clinton era, that administration enacted a rule that allowed for non-citizens to tap into some welfare benefits. The current education department is now reversing that rule, as the Daily Caller first reported.
Education Secretary Linda McMahon commented on the move, saying, quote, "Under President Trump's leadership, hardworking American taxpayers will no longer foot the bill for illegal aliens to participate in our career, technical, or adult education programs or activities."
The Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act limits public benefits to American citizens and permanent residents only, but the Clinton administration has exempted career and technical programs from this rule.
The Departments of Agriculture, Labor, Justice, and HHS also enacted similar rules under the same law. The Trump administration had filed lawsuits against states like Minnesota and Texas over in-state tuition for illegal immigrants. Texas decided to comply and scrap any such benefits.
Organizations like the ACLU are joining the legal fight against these measures. One of the authors of the Texas Dream Act, which allows undocumented immigrants to obtain reduced in-state tuition, told CBS in a statement earlier this month, quote, "It's been the law of the land, and attempts to repeal it over the years have all failed. It's just really cruel, manipulative, and mean-spirited what is being done by the Attorney General and the DOJ."
Go ahead.
Well, I think the goal is for migrants to come to this country. And this is after having, I live in Denver, Colorado, just for context. So we had the most migrants per capita at one point coming from Texas. And so I sat down with a lot of migrants and had conversations with them about, what are your goals here? What did you think by skipping all of these measures that are, quote unquote, the right way to come, but still making it to America and fighting your way into working? And they were just like, listen, I wouldn't have done this unless it was dire circumstances. For example, one guy that I talked to from Venezuela was literally like, it was life or death for me. Like, I left my wife and son behind so I can bring back scraps to get them out of there. We just had to leave. And also, I would love to work. I would love an extension of some type of formal paperwork so that I can work temporarily and contribute. I would love to pay taxes. And so even our mayor was talking a lot about that, how a lot of people that he's sat with have said the same things. There are few and far between that come here, and actually statistics show that are criminals or are doing things that are really terrorizing our environment. And there are people that are coming here just actually trying to make a way for their family. But I think beyond that, by repealing any access to become a productive citizen, is a really good game plan for the Trump administration right now, because obviously that plays well for the base and will get them the votes in the midterms. But long-term strategy, it's not really a good one. It's short-sighted, because when we think about creating a space where it's less accessible for migrants to get things like vaccinations and access to some health things that we don't want to give them access to, well, we're going to create more of an epidemic in our own society, where there's people who still live here, because there's no way we're getting every undocumented immigrant out, that could be spreading diseases because we're not vaccinating them, because they're not, quote unquote, have the appropriate status. And so we have to think about the whole realistic goal and what's accomplishable, and I think be a little more strategic with how we, yes, of course, reform immigration, but also make sure that the people are here can get at least access to some care that will protect most Americans.
I think most Americans are really just tired of people jumping the line. There's a lot of legal immigrants, and by the way, Hispanic voters shifting to the Republican Party more than ever, not even just in the last election, but since then they've actually moved further to the right, because they are frustrated with the fact that there is a group of people who not only jump the line to get access to this country and its public benefits, but are taking jobs, taking housing. We have seen massive housing shortages and housing prices increase in this country due to the influx of 20 million illegal immigrants. We've seen them taking massive amounts of public benefits, usually on the state level, but also federal too, through some loopholes, like this interpretation of the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Act by the Clinton administration. And I think nobody is of the position that there aren't some people who come here who have a vested interest in themselves and their family of being in the United States. But the problem is that we do have an asylum process, a legal process. If they are in a life or death situation, they are allowed to claim asylum. But what they're not allowed to do is cross over the border illegally and then claim that they get to stay because of some made-up rule that they deserve to be here. If you think that you deserve to be here, then you need to go through the proper process and allow that legal process to play out. And I think Americans feel very disrespected that people are taking advantage of loose border security in order to take benefits, jobs, housing that should be reserved for American citizens who pay into the system, and frankly, whose government was established on protecting their interest over that of illegal aliens.
And I think it's like a hard juxtaposition between that argument that usually comes from people that are in the Republican Party or have the wealth to employ, like Trump himself, undocumented migrants. Like, I don't know that the jobs being taken are actually the jobs that most Americans were going for. And so there's like a friction between like getting somebody the education so that they can mean well in our society and contribute. Like, this all helps us build our economy. We need laborers, right? We need workers. A lot of the jobs that these companies that have pushed back recently on President Trump saying, hey, if you cut all this, these migrants that are undocumented out of our work system, we crumble, right? Because we can't find the Americans to fill some of these roles. So I think there's like a misconception on how many Americans are being replaced by migrants that come into work here and how many people are opening up their doors to migrants, because from everything from agriculture on to real big business are using undocumented migrants in several ways. And I think that that's an important thing to understand as we're giving people the training in things like agriculture, and also just making sure that they're having some type of health and vaccination, like the bare minimum, to make sure they're not coming to work also in some of those jobs that Americans are not taking, and then getting the Americans that do work there sick. I mean, it's just a strategic thing as opposed to a very pointed thing. I think some of this is a little bit of grandstanding, because this has been a winning issue for President Trump, because it was a failing issue, which I'm the first to admit, for President Biden, right? The ball was dropped. But I think that the overcorrection has even gone too far for people within his party, because he's gotten a lot of pushback about how far he's going with some of these policies and making actual way for people to come in here. On top of that, he did create or recently created a more complicated process for just certain countries to have trouble getting to the U.S., right? So we're not talking about the white South African farmers. He made it super easy for them. But then everybody coming from Venezuela, he's making it a little bit harder. And I think that also people have uncomfortable positions about that, because what is the difference? There's not an actual genocide going on in South Africa. There are people dying on farms the same way there's people dying in Chicago over violence. And that was the root issue of it. But there's people who are dying in Venezuela because of corruption, because they're getting killed by gangs trying to just leave their country, who I've spoken to that are like the same, how can you pick and choose who can come just because you're president? It's like, we want to create a space where asylum is a real process that's not picked and chosen by who President Trump likes.
Yeah, a lot to respond to there. I'll start with the apparent backlash against him going too far on immigration. Immigration is still actually his best polled issue. According to a recent YouGov poll that came out this week, it's basically split 50-50 among the American people of those who approve or disapprove of his handling of immigration. It's actually far above his handling of the economy. On the point about jobs Americans won't do, it's not a question of an American won't do the job. It's that they won't do a job at a slave labor wage. So if you get rid of illegal immigrants, you allow wages to rise naturally for American citizens so that they can be employed in meaningful work that actually pays them what that labor is worth. I think it's really immoral, actually, to have an underclass of people in this country who are getting paid less than the work actually calls for because they have come into the country illegally. Now, the answer to that is not to give them all work permits, because that, of course, prices out even further American labor. But the answer is to allow Americans to take those jobs and force companies to raise wages and provide benefits so that Americans will take them. And I think Trump should absolutely prosecute every single business owner that is employing undocumented immigrants. To me, that's unacceptable.
He'd have to prosecute himself.
Fine. He doesn't run his business
anymore,
obviously.
but like, how we retroactively, should we bring up an old lawsuit? That's literally like most business people are in this country.
Good. They should all be fined.
Well,
what they're
I
doing
appreciate an equal opportunity stance on that. If
Absolutely.
you feel like President Trump himself, I'm down with that.
Yeah, if he did it, fine him. I don't care. Up next, some Zohran Mamdani allies are looking into primarying Hakeem Jeffries and other Democrats.